Our final speaker is Allison Goddard, a magistrate judge for the Southern District of California. In the past, she was a civil litigator in class action lawsuits and intellectual property disputes. Judge Goddard, you have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, and I apologize. I'm using my iPad. I don't usually use my iPad, so I don't really know where to look. So if I'm looking off screen, I'm sorry for that. But thank you for having me today. I was lucky to meet some of your leaders through a mock trial scrimmage and honored that they asked me to come and speak to you this morning. I love what your group is doing, and I love the motivation that it shows. It's really a great way to learn about your next steps in life. So I'll just jump in. Darren, is that how you want me to just get started?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So I'm a magistrate judge in the Southern District of California. And let me tell you what that means. Let me just switch this because it's a little bit weird. Okay, there we go. Let me tell you what that means. If you're familiar with the federal courts, you've got the Supreme Court. They're the highest court in the land. You have circuit courts. Those are courts of appeal. They only hear certain cases that have already been decided by lower courts. Then you have trial courts. And in the federal court, we have two different types of judges in the trial court system. District judges are nominated by the president and appointed by and approved by the Senate. You've probably heard a little bit about that in the last few years. And then below district judges, we have magistrate judges. That's who I am. We're merit-based, and we are appointed for 8-year terms. So I got my job by putting in an application and being interviewed by a panel of attorneys and community members, and then being selected to be interviewed by the district judges, and then the district judges selected me. So I was sworn in on August 1st, 2019, and I will serve until July 31st, 2026, at which time I hope I'll be reappointed because it's a great job, but also because it has a great retirement. If I make it to 14 years, I get a really good retirement. So it's a job I could do for the rest of my life. It's a really fun and I won't say easy, but it's easy and it's very low stress. I have a lot of control over what happens in my days, and I have a lot of say in what happens in my courtroom, which is great. And as a judge, people will treat you really well, which is also very fun. The type of work that I do, I handle two types of cases: criminal cases and civil cases. In criminal cases, I do, and in both of those types of cases, I handle the everything up to trial. So in a criminal case, if you get arrested, you get brought before a magistrate judge. I tell you what you're charged with, and I make sure you know your rights, your constitutional rights, and then I decide whether or not bail can be set for you so that whether you can stay out of prison while you're waiting for charges to be pending. And let me give you just a snapshot of the typical case we see. Almost all of our criminal cases are illegal importation of drugs across the border. And here's what happens. I think it's really important for high school students to know this. And tell your friends too, because the cartels really, they really prey on younger people. I've seen too many people who are 18 but still in high school, and they get arrested with drugs in a car that they're driving across the border. And there's a mandatory minimum 10-year sentence for that. No one seems to know that when it gets started. The reality is people usually get 3 or 4 years, but we're talking 3 to 4 years in prison. But this is how those crimes typically happen. They advertise on Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, in the papers in Tijuana. And they say things like, do you want to make some extra money? And they lure you in a little bit at a time. And so what they'll often say is, we just need you to drive this car across the border. We're not going to tell you what's in it. That way, if you get caught, you can tell them, I don't know. The law doesn't care if you know or not. And if you're caught with 500 grams or more of methamphetamine or heroin or cocaine or even a smaller amount of fentanyl, that's when those mandatory minimums kick in. And so I see people in my court all day who are low on funds, desperate for money, and got recruited to do this, had no idea what they were getting themselves into. And the only way out is to spend a few years in jail. So most of my cases are that. It's hard to see. And drug addiction plays a big role in how people get to see me in court. It's often what leads them there. One other thing I'll tell you before I go into the civil side is, as teenagers, you need to know, you need to memorize at least one person's phone number. Because when you get arrested, typically, even really in any case, but especially if you get arrested at the border, the police take your phone away. And so if you can imagine, you are arrested, you're taken into an interview room, and you say, they say, well, you know, is there anyone we can call to help you with bail? Say, yeah, you can call my mom. What's her number? I don't know, it's in my phone. But you don't have your phone anymore. So my public service announcement for all high school kids is know at least one phone number. First of all, don't get arrested. And second, know at least one phone number. So that's what I do on the civil side. Lots of border crimes, a little bit of child porn, and some hacking stuff. Most of the stuff is pretty much the same thing over and over again. A lot of illegal entry too. On the civil side, I do all sorts of cases. I have from lemon law cases to ADA to patent litigation. I just settled a class action. It settled for about $1.2 million. I've had cases settled for like $10 million. I handle all of the pre-trial stuff for those cases. So I set the schedule, I meet with the attorneys, and the most important thing I do is I try and see if I can get the case settled early. That helps prevent congestion in the courts, because we have too many cases for judges. And it also just saves people money. It's a bad business plan to be litigating. Lawsuits are expensive. And so I try and do all of this with an eye towards the fact that I'm working with people. And so having good people skills is really important in my job. Treating people with a sense of humanity is really important, especially on the criminal side. But every day is different. Every day is unpredictable. Every day requires me to think and use my brain. And that's just fantastic. I just love that about my job. Now, how did I get here? So I am not a San Diego native. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I'm the fourth of 6 children. I went to an all-girls high school, and I graduated with 34 women in my class. It was a really small school. And it was a fantastic experience. We could not get in, we certainly could get in trouble, but we always got caught because you couldn't hide in that small group. But I just learned a lot about having confidence in myself, and feeling good about the decisions I made. But one thing is, I always thought I wanted to be a lawyer, but I did not have any lawyers in my family. There's no lawyers or judges in my family. And I think it's really hard to jump into a career if you don't understand what the path is to that. And so what I did was I went to college. I went to Boston College, and that was great. I got out of town, moved away from my family. I think they enjoyed it as well. But learned to be independent and self-sufficient. And when I got out of college, I wasn't sure, my senior year, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, but I liked school. I was a poli-sci major, political science. So I didn't get in, I thought I would want to be a professor. So I didn't get into the program I wanted to get into. I got into a program at the University of Tennessee. So I moved back to Tennessee. I did grad school for a year. I hated it. I realized there's no way I could be in academics. So I decided I would stop going to graduate school. I was dating my husband at the time. He lived in San Diego. So I moved out here, and I did the thing that a political science major is really most qualified to do. I was a receptionist for a couple of years for a company, and then worked for a startup here, and started to realize, as I was helping with like contract issues and touching on legal issues, that I was getting no respect for my opinion. It was kind of like I'd get a pat on the head, like, oh, that's so cute, the girl has an idea. And I was really frustrated by that. I felt like I had as much to bring to the table as anyone else. And I realized if I wanted my voice to be heard, I needed to put some credentials behind it. So my husband and I had been married for about 2 years, and I was like, hey, I think I want to, now that we're making money and we can afford to buy things, I think I want to stop working and go to law school. He was very supportive of that. I went to University of San Diego. I was able to get a really good scholarship there, and I did well in law school. And I went to work for an international law firm called Goddard when I first got out. It was a great place to work. I was really lucky to get the job. But at a big law firm, they represent really sophisticated clients, big money people. They charge big money, they pay big money, but it's not a good place to get experience as a lawyer because the cases are so high stakes. It's really hard for them to risk a case on a young lawyer who hasn't proven themselves. So I was there for about 4 years. I got a lot of good experience. I argued for the Court of Appeal. I took some depositions, and I did some motion work and went to court. But I realized that if I wanted to really get experience as a lawyer, I had to do something different. Also, by that time, I was a mother. So my oldest son was 6 months old. I left Cooley and started my own law firm. And that enabled me to have my own schedule. And so then I had control, and that's really important as a working parent. It made it really possible for me. When we would get, the daycare would call and say your son has a fever, I didn't have to worry about what my boss thought about me leaving work. I just went and picked up my son and went home and worked. And so it gave me a lot of flexibility, and it worked really well. I was in my own firm for about 7 years and was doing business litigation, nothing like super exciting, but interesting work. And then in 2010, a few things happened. I call it my year of Job. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the biblical character of Job, but it was like the perfect storm. My son got very sick. He was 5 at the time, and he had a mystery illness. We had a panel of doctors from around the country helping us with him. He couldn't walk, and he spent a lot of time at Children's Hospital. And that type of experience really gives you perspective on what's important in life. Luckily, he's fully recovered. He's out surfing right now. He's an 11th grader at Waldorf High School. But it was very scary. And then we have an investment property in Tennessee, and there was a biblical flood, like once every 1,000 years is what they predict these floods happen. And it drained all of our savings to repair the property. And my husband at the time had left he's still my husband. At that time, my husband had left his job to go back and get his teaching credential. He's now a high school teacher at San Diego High School. So I was the breadwinner. And on top of that, so I've got sick kid, husband's not working, flood, no savings. The 2008 recession caught up with my law firm, and we didn't have any business. Our business got kind of shuffled around to other lawyers, and Cooley was our big source of income. Started keeping a lot more cases that they would normally refer to us. So I was really in a bind. I didn't know what I was going to do. And a friend of mine from law school reached out to me and said, I'm doing plaintiff's work in class actions. I'm dying. I need help so bad. Can you come and help me? And I didn't know if I could do that type of work. It was so different than what I had been doing. But I was a breadwinner and my family needed bread. So I said, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I fell in love with representing plaintiffs in consumer and employment class actions. I felt like I was representing real people, not just corporations. And I took the cases that I believed in the most and felt the most strongly about. And as a result, I credit embracing my passion with everything kind of coming together for me as a lawyer. I was able to get tremendous experience in court all the time. I did, in the course of 9 years, I had 6 trials. 4 were class action trials. 1 was a patent infringement trial with a $145 million jury verdict. Unfortunately, it's on appeal. And I had probably my one of a trial. If you're ever interested, you could look it up. There'd be a lot of, you could just look up my name and Beth Burns. I had a 5-week trial where I represented the former women's basketball coach from San Diego State, Beth Burns. She had been fired, and it didn't make any sense because she was the winningest coach in San Diego State history. So why would a college that wanted to succeed in athletics fire the winningest coach in history? And that didn't make sense to me. So we dug deeper, and it became very clear that they fired her because she was relentless in demanding that her female athletes get equal opportunity as Title IX guarantees to them. And the athletic director didn't like that. He wanted a women's basketball program that didn't win because they couldn't demand anything if they were losing. And so we had a 5-week trial, and we won that trial. Her annual income was about $200,000 a year, and the jury awarded her $3.3 million. About $2 million was really for what we call non-economic damages, but it was for basically the loss of her career, because San Diego State, the way they handled the case, stole her profession from her. She will never be a head coach again for women's basketball in college. She's now coaching at the University of Louisville in Kentucky as an assistant coach. But colleges won't take a risk on her because she's been involved in litigation, even though she did not draw first blood. This was something that she had to do to protect her own reputation. She's happy now. U of L is a top 4 program in the NCAA every year. She's doing great things there. But it was really amazing to represent her and seek justice for her. So that was one of my favorite cases. And I'll just tell you about another case that I had. It's ongoing, but it's a case that just meant a whole lot to me. Also, if you were to Google, you'd probably find a lot about this case. Sharp Grossmont Hospital, back in like 2013, the CEO had a bit of a vendetta against one of the doctors who worked there. And he had been a whistleblower against the hospital. And someone had suspected him of taking drugs off the drug cart. And so they set up a sting operation, but it was not very well thought out. So if you can imagine, they put hidden cameras in each of their operating rooms in their women's center. And the cameras were directed to the operating table where the women were laying during their surgeries. So they and they were motion censored cameras. And so they were programmed to turn on and off with the motion in the room. So for an entire year, Sharp made secret recordings of their patients at their most vulnerable times, during the birth of children, during the loss of children, during hysterectomies. And so I represented a class of women against Sharp. We weren't able to get the class certified, but it became a mass action with about 400 plaintiffs against Sharp Grossmont Hospital. It's still going on today. But I was just really, when your passion merges with your skills in a profession, you'll find that is when you will hit your greatest stride. And that was a case I really, really enjoyed. And hopefully the plaintiffs will end up prevailing, but it's out of my hands now. The last part of my career as a lawyer was certainly, those last 9 years was certainly the most fulfilling of all my 20 years working as a lawyer before I became a judge. But I can't, they were only possible because I went through the first parts of my career, which were not as rewarding and really hard. Your 20s, I hope that you all enjoy every second of college. If you are lucky enough to be able to go to a school and have a campus experience and live in a dorm and enjoy that college experience. Particularly, I was so lucky I had a meal card, so I didn't have to worry about where my food was coming from. I had a fun campus to go to. Enjoy and savor every moment of that. And then when you get out of college, it can be a really rude awakening. So get yourself ready for that. Your 20s are going to be probably the most challenging time in your life. And I understand that you may feel pretty challenged right now, but you start, the hardest part is you can feel like you're not tethered to anything anymore, and you're really on your own. And that can be really difficult. Instead of pretending it doesn't happen, I'd rather tell you it happened to me. It was a really hard time. My husband and I were married. We kind of went through it together, but it took us a while to find ourselves, and to feel that confidence. I mentioned I worked as a receptionist, and then I worked in a startup telecom company, and I wore a lot of hats. I was the tariff manager, I was the contracts administrator, but it was a really horrible experience in some ways, but it was one of the most important experiences I've ever had. I learned about the politics of an office setting. I had what I thought was a really good idea. And so I wrote it all up and I shared it with the CEO, and it was a good idea, but I should have known that what I should have done is I should have sent it up through the person below the CEO so that that person could claim it for their own and present it to the CEO. And I learned that a really hard lesson there. I learned that life's not always fair. But one of the things I also learned was it's a long game that you're playing. You can do things that are unethical to get you short-term gains. But if you do that, you are risking long-term failure. Your reputation can be ruined in a second. It has to be built up over years. And that is, it's hard. It's really hard a lot of times to do the right thing when you see other people around you not living by that same code. But you'll be able to live with yourself better. And in the long run, you will be much more successful. That's a little bit of advice. And I'm going to give you just a couple minutes more and then open it up if anyone has any questions. The other thing I would tell you is you need to be dependable. If you say you're going to be somewhere, be somewhere. Don't call in sick to work unless you're really, really sick. If you have a deadline, meet it. Because what I found is dependability will make up for any lack of confidence you have. So when I started working at a big law firm, I didn't know anything about the law. Nothing. I mean, I had been to law school, but that's about it. But when the partners knew that if they gave me a deadline, I'd meet it. When they knew that if they had a question for me, that I would do the research and that I would do it well and thoroughly, I had no problem escalating up the ladder in that law firm. I got more experience opportunities than anyone else. And it wasn't because I was the brightest lawyer there. It's because I did my job and they knew I would do it and I was dependable. So it's really important to be dependable and to treat people with respect. When you become a judge, when you want to become a judge, that process, the panel that interviewed me got my application, and before they let me go to an interview with the district judges, they call 40 people. Mostly they focus on people who've been on the other side of cases with me to see if I'm a good person, to see if I was easy to work with, was I reasonable, and did I respect people? And if you don't do that, you won't move forward in those types of decisions, in those types of careers. So treat people with respect and be dependable. Okay, I see okay, let's see. By the way, I've got some Q&A, and I'm gonna go to those right now. And I have to say, I got the last bit of Mr. Cornforth, and I wish I had listened to him more because I thought it was very interesting. Okay, so one of the questions is, can you describe what representing plaintiffs in class action lawsuits means? Does this mean consumers against companies? And yes, that's exactly what it means. And let me give you an example of one of the class actions I worked on. I represented a class of consumers against Restoration Hardware. There's a law in California that says that retailers can't ask for your zip code at the same, if you pay with a credit card, the cash register. The reason why you do that, they can't do that is, well, the reason why the retailers do that is because they like to take the zip code and the name from the credit card swipe, and they build basically like a consumer file on you, and they buy data on you from data management companies. So and they use that to create things like hit lists. So for example, if you purchase, if you're the data aggregator can see if you just bought a house or if you just bought a car, and so you might get ads for deck furniture or things like that. But if there's indications from your consumer file that you might be pregnant, they'll send you information about having a baby. It's kind of personally intrusive, but that's the law in California, and they were violating it. And we represented a class of consumers, we represented a class of consumers. We took them to court. We got them to stop the practice, and we got them to agree to pay every consumer they had asked, either they're at the consumer's option, $30, or get a coupon that was worth up to $3,000 at Restoration Hardware. And they ended up paying out approximately $100 million in benefits to the class. So that's a type of, that's a class action. Okay, there's another one that is, how does being a magistrate judge change your perspective of being a lawyer? I don't know how I would kind of flip that. One of the things that I can do as a magistrate judge is I can address the bad conduct of lawyers. So that's very satisfying. I mentioned that, it's hard to keep your head up high when you feel like you're playing fair and no one else is. And I've been around the block on this stuff. I've represented people on both sides of the aisle. I had corporate defense representation for the first 10 years of my practice and plaintiffs on the second 10 years. So I know when people are being shady, and I'm able to call them out on it. It's very satisfying. So that's helpful. But if anything, it's emphasized for me how foolish it is to not be completely honest and straightforward with the court, because I pick up on attempts to mislead me all the time, and it makes me distrustful of you. So if you come before me a lot, it's a real big mistake, because it's going to be hard for you to build your credibility up with me again. The next question is, what would you tell high schoolers who may want to become a lawyer or work in the justice system? If you think you want to do it, keep this in mind. If you get out of college, if you get out of college, you're like 21, and you're going to retire probably at your age, in your age group, it's not going to be till your late 70s. You're going to have like 55 years to work. You have a lot of time to work. You can do a lot of different things in there. You don't have to plan to just do one thing. Being versatile and well-rounded is really important. I would not recommend, the first thing I recommend is be nice to everyone, because you have to have a good reputation in the community. But the second thing is, don't feel like you have to do like criminal justice major or poli-sci and then go straight to law school. Think about making yourself a well-rounded person. Go into college without a major and really pursue what you love so that you can get good grades at it and enjoy it. And then work for a year in a job, even if it's as a receptionist, or a low-level office job. You'll understand the office environment. It'll be really important. Go to law school with a year or two work under your belt. You'll be so excited to be back in school. You'll appreciate it so much more. And you'll have a much broader perspective, particularly if you represent business people. If you want to do criminal law, really the same thing. There's lots of jobs you can get outside of college that will help you be sure you want to be a lawyer. Like if you want to do on the criminal side, you can be an investigator. You can work in pretrial services. There's all sorts of areas of the court you can work in. But don't feel like you have to be, that there's a rigid path. You can stop along the way and work and get experience. The benefit of doing that is when you work outside a law firm, you're learning all those initial hard lessons about working with other people and professional environments outside the area where you're going to live forever. So you can make more mistakes. But once you get to work in a law firm, your mistakes live with you for a long time, depending on what they are. So get a little bit of experience outside. Don't be afraid that if you want to, people who have science backgrounds and go to law school are highly sought after in law firms because they know about, for patent work, they have a much better scientific mind. People who have accounting degrees are great in law firms because they understand the language of the business. And people who are English majors do well in law as lawyers because they can write well. So follow what you like to do in college, and then you go to law school a couple years after, so a little bit of experience. On my day-to-day schedule, every day it's different. This week I had 2 days of the week I had criminal duty. Right now with COVID, that means all of our criminal work is done on VTC because they can't bring inmates in from the prison. So I do like a Zoom link with prisoners. It's technically very challenging because of bad bandwidth. And it's also hard because you're not able to make a personal connection with them, which I think is important. But I did a lot of arraignments. I took some guilty pleas. On the civil side, I have settlement conferences, usually 4 or 5 a week. I do some of them. Some days I have like one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And then I had a hearing on Friday where I had one of those experiences where the lawyers weren't behaving well, and I got to call them on it. That was kind of fun too. Have you ever faced a conflict between your own personal morals and the decisions you have to make as a judge? I haven't had that yet, and I don't know that I will have to have that as a magistrate judge. I think you might have to have that, like for example, if you were against the death penalty and you were faced with a capital punishment case. I don't think that's going to be as much of an issue where that's a real true conflict. One thing I do have is some of the decisions I make, I don't know if I made the right decision. It's hard. It's really, I can give you an example. I have prisoner, when you're charged with a crime and you're let out on bail, most people have to be drug tested, and they cannot have any illegal drugs in their system. And I had a defendant who constantly tested positive for meth. At the same time, he had been in an accident and he was missing the front half of his skull. So if you saw him, it kind of reminds you of like a Cro-Magnon, right? Like the old caveman, like he's had this huge indent. It was very hard to look at indent, and his brain was not covered by a skull right here. Yeah, it was crazy. And he needed to have surgery to put in a prosthetic skull. And we worked with him, but there's only so much I can do if he won't stay off drugs. And we couldn't get him in a residential treatment program, and I had to put him back in jail. That's really hard to do. I'm hoping that we found a bed for him. But that's really hard to know. It's really, you're not always comfortable with it. It's hard to see. We do a lot of illegal entry cases, and there are people who, came into the country. Their parents may have brought them in when they were 2 or 4. They've never known any other country. They don't know anyone in Mexico. They don't speak Spanish. They only speak English. And they did something dumb, right? Typically when they were 18 to 21, maybe they got caught for selling drugs. They got a felony charge. They got convicted. And that makes you already they don't have citizenship, and then that makes you very deportable. So they get deported and they come across illegally, and, there's no path for them to become citizens. And so it's my job to uphold the law, and they get convicted for illegal entry, and that means they get deported, but it doesn't feel good, right? You wish that there were some solution, some way we could handle that differently. But it's very clear to me, though, that it's my job as a judge to uphold the law, and I'm not a policymaker, so that is difficult. That is a difficult situation. Another question is, how many cases do I estimate I get a year? My caseload I carry is on average about 250 civil cases. And then I get I'm going to add this up. I probably have criminal duty 5 times a year, and I probably get about 200. So I probably carry about 1,000 criminal cases in a year. But remember, I'm only doing the pretrial part. So once you have bail set or denied, and once you get arraigned, meaning you've reached the next level in your criminal prosecution, I hand those cases off. So 1,000 sounds big, but it's not that much. And then the 250 civil cases, some take longer than others to resolve. So I think I'm out of time, but let me know, Darren. Cut me off if you need to.
No, you're good actually. I think there was another question as part of this. It was how many like larger or more significant cases do you get compared to some of the more common ones?
I'd probably say it's about half. I mean, it depends. I mean, I guess with the way I would break it up to, well, I don't want to say that. I get, if I went by like the amount of money at issue, it's probably about 15% over $1 million at issue. So one of my bigger cases, I've had 2 pretty cases that have been in the news lately. One is the Gina Champion Kane case, if you've been following that at all. She was the woman who owned the patio restaurants and Surfrider Pizza. And it turned out she was running, a $300 million Ponzi scheme. That's my case. I've been in charge of addressing all of the property sales by the receiver. It's been really interesting. Those cases are fascinating. And then I also just entered an order that got a lot of press. OANN is actually local. It's locally owned. It's a right-wing news network, and they sued Rachel Maddow for defamation. And I'm the magistrate judge on that case. So the district judge ruled dismiss their case, and then I just issued an order granting Rachel Maddow about $250,000 in attorney's fees. Also a very interesting case. The lawyers on the case were really good, and it was fun to have them in the courtroom and be part of it. But the small cases can be really compelling too. One of the things I have to tell people a lot, I had to do this as a lawyer, and so I have to do it as a judge too. With plaintiffs, a lot of times if they bring a case and it's not very good, maybe that they got fired and they're really upset about it, but there's really not an avenue for them legally to sue, or if they do, it's going to be really hard and they won't get much. I have to tell people a lot of times, there's a lot of things that happen that are unfair, but that doesn't make them illegal. Like the court system doesn't have a remedy for that. And so that can be a really hard message to deliver, but I think people appreciate being told straight up when that's the case. And that's one of the things that I do a lot. I have to do that a lot with people.
All right, well, thank you so much for telling us about your career and the intricacies of being a magistrate judge. Attendees, I posted a Google form for feedback. Thank you. And also, if you want to get in touch with Judge Goddard or any of our speakers, you can do so in the form.
Yeah, when COVID's over, if any of you are interested, you can just, I think Darren has my email. You can send me an email and let me know you're interested in coming down and taking a look at the courtroom. I think by the summer we'll be in a position to do this. And if I have a criminal calendar, I'll just have you come down and watch my criminal calendar, and I'll take you back to my chambers and show you where I work, and give you a 20-minute tour and answer any questions you have. I'm happy to share what I do if it's interesting, and I love to get other people interested in it too. So thank you.
Yeah, sounds good. If that sounds interesting to anyone, then you can do so in the Google form. There's a space for any messages. You can just say that you'd like to get in touch, and I'll provide you with the email.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, no. And hey, Darren, I think you guys did pretty well in the competition, didn't you? Like number 4, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Okay, everyone, that is a wrap on our Law and Social Justice Day. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're extremely appreciative of your support and attending, and also big thanks to our wonderful speakers for sharing your educational stories and life advice. We hope you're able to take away at least something from our conference that will be useful to your futures and spark inspiration for your future careers. Like Darren said, please make sure to fill out this feedback form in the chat so we can hear your thoughts about your experience attending our webinar. And with that being said, thank you so much once again for attending Spark Conference 2021, and have a great rest of your day.